Mr. Beacon podcast is sponsored by Wiliot, scaling IoT with battery-free Bluetooth.
So welcome back to the Mr. Beacon podcast. This week we are transcending the Atlantic from here in San Diego to Amsterdam. I'm talking to Bastien de Groot, who is the CEO of Ingi, who are a smart lighting company, and we're going to be talking about smart buildings, smart cities, some of the disruptive power of lighting, both from a business point of view and from an environmental point of view. So, Bastien, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So just before we launch in, I want to give what's becoming a regular shout out to Starbucks. Not for their great coffee, which I enjoy, not for the fact that they provide me my office space whenever I'm on the road, but they have this amazing program for young adults on the autism spectrum, and they are providing them jobs. One of them is my son, and it's been transformational. So no exchange of funds here, no sponsorship. I just really want to thank the folks at Starbucks for that. It's a wonderful thing. All right. So that's my that's our commercial break. Actually, I think there are other commercial breaks depending on where you listen to this too. So thanks for having that extra one. So Bastien, just tell us a little bit about yourself. You're CEO of this Dutch lighting company. You've worked at Philips. When did you first get passionate about lighting?
When I got passionate about it, I think you have to disentangle that into two questions. When did you start working in lighting, and when did you start becoming passionate about it? I can tell you that, those were two distinct moments.
Two distinct things. Okay. Well,
So as you rightfully said, I've got a bit of an unusual background, which I think in the words of Steve Jobs, looking backwards, you can connect the dots. And I think I've got some unique combination of dots that got me where I am today in an unplanned way. So my original background was in machine learning and artificial intelligence. Before that was called deep learning, and it was still basic statistics, basically. Great in computer science, so I graduated in that in the Netherlands. Then wanted to do something really innovative, launch some innovative product. So if you're Dutch and you look to launch some innovative products, then Philips is the natural place to look. So I basically had two choices: either go into algorithmic trading at ABN AMRO, or launch innovative products at Philips. That's the two choices as Dutchman. So it became Philips, and this was 2007. So I think I made the right call given timing. Worked for Philips in the renovation department, touched a lot on lighting. Then left Philips, left to London, joined a boutique strategy consulting firm in corporate venturing. So really focused on launching disruptive businesses. So there really my combination started to grow. And then I joined Vela Sylvania, which is one of the largest lighting companies in the world. They were looking for a head of strategy. And they saw these entrance of the IT world into the lighting world. So they were looking for somebody that understood both IT and lighting, and that could help them transform their company. So suddenly I had those three elements. Built the smart lighting business there rather successfully, left, and then started Ingi together with my co-founder.
Wonderful. Well, I do want to talk about what your company is doing, but before we go there, let's take I think a relevant detour. And I just want to congratulate you on the TED presentation that you did, touching on how smart lighting can help us out of this environmental crisis. And so I recommend anyone to watch it. You did a wonderful job there. Can you kind of distill what you were advocating in that presentation? Because it was not. definitely recognize the problem that we face with climate change and doing what I can, but I never thought about light bulbs as a solution. So how can lighting potentially help us with smart cities and the environment?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the key challenge that we see, and especially with the big, we're just with the big climate change and environmental issues we're seeing at the moment, is that we simply have to use our resources more efficiently. And if you just so everybody always focuses immediately on energy consumption, we have to reduce the energy. But if you think about it a little bit bigger, it's not about just making cars run more efficiently. It's about using less cars, but still being able to enjoy the lifestyle as much as we can, right? And if you start looking around you in the world, actually on a larger scale, you just see so many resources being underutilized, right? We can just use them much more efficiently. So if you look at buildings as an example, I mean, I think the stats differ, but somewhere around 50% of desks or office space at any given time is not being utilized. The problem is we just don't know which 50%, and we can't utilize it more efficiently. Mm-hmm. The same in cities. A very large percentage of traffic in a city is not actually transporting anyone. It's people trying to find parking spaces. So if you would just be able to understand much more of what is being used at any given time and who needs what at any given time, and you can in real time match those, you don't need to degrade any quality of our living, but you can just much more efficiently use it. And a lot of people are focused on, we can make buildings 50% more energy efficient. Yeah, but what if we could utilize 50% less buildings, right? Mm-hmm. This is a far more effective way of looking at it. So if you want to do any type of this kind of work, typically you quite quickly move into the Internet of Things space. You need to deploy a lot of sensors, right? You can see where the free parking spaces are. You can see where the cars are. You can see where which meeting rooms are being used. You can see where the people are that need the meeting rooms. But then the big trouble is, all right, then I need to deploy this humongous sensor network, which is very costly. And if you want to roll these sensors out in any kind of efficient way, you typically start using wireless sensors in combinations with battery power, because that's the only way you can install them in an effective way. Until 6 months or a year down the track, when you have to replace all the batteries. Right? And then the second one is, great, this wireless network technology, but anyone that ever tried to use Wi-Fi in an office knows that getting reliable network coverage into every corner of a building or a city is actually really, really hard. And there comes lighting, right? There enters lighting. So lighting is everywhere. Lighting is always powered. And so if you take these two properties, and increasingly lighting is already being connected, because we're already trying to dim it to turn the lumen up. So there is already a communication module present. So if you take those together, you say, right, what if I would start putting some of those sensors in my lights? That then means that there is no installation cost, because at the moment I install the lights, I install the sensor as well, so no extra cost. Actually, the hardware cost is minimal, because you can use the housing of the lighting to put the sensors in. You have no battery replacement, because the energy cost of a sensor compared to a light point is so minimum. You don't notice, and you already got the communication chip in place. So you just need to utilize it in a more effective way, so it can actually connect to the internet. And then for any sensors that can't connect or that cannot be placed inside the luminaire, just for physical properties, actually your luminaires can now create this huge mesh network, right? So they basically, each luminaire can become a wireless router and repeat your signal. So even if you want to place a sensor, for example, you want to measure temperature, which you have to measure at 1.5 meters height, so you can't put it in the ceiling. But you can now make a sensor, and you can make this an energy harvesting sensor, because all the sensor needs to do is connect to the first light point. And then that light point, together with all the other light points, can ensure it can always connect to the internet. So your lights can also become a dedicated IoT network.
Yes.
And this way you can roll these sensors out in an effective way that you need to really understand how to manage your buildings and cities in a more effective and carbon efficient way.
Very good. So you kind of very cleverly integrated the occupancy sensing for parking spaces with occupancy sensing for desks and offices, and that, I think, neatly leads us to what your company is doing. Can you outline a bit about what you do and don't do? Because lighting, there's lots of different components in a lighting system. What do you do in that ecosystem?
Yeah. So first of all, as a startup, you've got to focus, right? So the first choice you got to make into lighting, is it outdoor or indoor, right? Yeah. Because that's completely different market. So we focused on indoor for a variety of reasons. So with Ingi, we only deal with the indoor space. Not to say there is not a great opportunity in the outdoor space, but we don't deal with it. So what we then focused on is, we said, look, the key to make such a thing work is to build an ecosystem, a collaborative way, right? Because you basically want to have a whole range of sensors and sense all kinds of things. And then you want to get that data through your luminaires, and then you want to make that data available to the all kinds of different platforms that can help, that can do something with this data. If I can see the occupancy rate, I want to feed that into the room booking system, but I also want to feed that into the app that the cleaners use to schedule their work, because they only have to clean rooms that are actually being used. I want to feed that into the HVAC system, because then we can turn the HVAC on, or we can reduce the amount of HVAC cooling based on the amount of people being present. So you really want to. And you can't build all of this alone, right? That's just not. So you really want to make sure you build an ecosystem of players around you. So this is what we've done. So we said, look, what we're going to solve is, we're going to solve one problem and solve it really well. So what we need to be able to do is make a mesh network with tens of thousands of sensor points in one network. That needs to operate. And it needs to be able to integrate very low cost into a luminaire, because we can't make the luminaires twice as expensive, because then the whole idea doesn't work anymore. And we're going to make sure that all that data is available in open APIs, and we're going to build a partnership, an ecosystem of people that can use that network. So we basically have a three-way platform model. So we make the software in the middle that goes into the luminaires. We license that to a whole range of luminaire manufacturers that use our software both to deliver lighting control, so they can control their lighting, turn the lights on and off based on daylight and occupancy. We license it to sensor manufacturers that then can provide sensors that either can be integrated into the luminaire or can utilize the network of luminaires. And we have partnerships with a whole range of portal providers that we can feed the data to, and that can utilize it in different activities and value streams within the building to optimize them based on the data that we gather.
So that sounds like quite a strategic position, and given your strategic past, then that kind of makes sense. My guess is this: if I was Philips, GE, or just escaping me. But actually, we've had them on the show, so I'm really kicking myself. But if I was one of those big lighting companies that made luminaires, I'd want to do that. Do you find yourself competing with those giants?
Well, I think you know, without doing finger pointing, but what we see is that some of the very biggest players, so, like Philips,
Yes.
tend to have an believe that they can do this themselves.
Yes.
And so we typically tend to come across them as competitors.
Yes.
We see that we currently have a significant head start on them. And this is being confirmed by our customers that we go head to head with them and we are being selected. Not in every case, but there's a large part of the market where we can definitely compete. But what we're seeing is sort of if you look at maybe one tier below it, the very biggest giants, actually the lighting market is a very it used to be a highly concentrated market, right? So before the introduction of LED, for the non-lighting geeks, like the new lighting technology, the lighting used to be highly concentrated. So you had the three giants, and they were making the light bulbs, and their values of scale really worked. But actually, with the introduction of LED, volumes of scale or don't work at all in the lighting industry. So you actually see now that there are tens of thousands of lighting players in the world, and that actually the biggest ones no longer have the big market share that they have. And if you look at the tier below it, there's lots of players that do 50 million, 100 million in revenue. And for them to develop such an IT system is far beyond their reach. Yeah. So we're actually partnering with, if we look at the top 10 in Europe, I think we've now partnered with one or two players in the top 10, and we've got very far discussions with another two or three in the top 10 in Europe that are saying, look, one, the investment is really big, it's a significant investment. Two, it's a very different set of capabilities, right? We're a manufacturing company, we understand hardware, we don't understand software. This is a far away show for us, so we don't want to enter that space. We want to license it and put it into our luminaires, but don't build it ourselves. The skill cap is too big. And three, we don't want a lock-in. Our customers don't want a lock-in. They want a system that they can buy from multiple luminaires manufacturers.
So you could potentially run across Philips, and Acuity was the name that I was searching for, and GE. Is that part of the value proposition, that you can help an IoT system that avoids being locked in by those giants?
Yes, and I mean, I think customers start to resist this on several fronts, right? They're saying, look, if I standardize my data infrastructure on your data infrastructure, I'm then also locked into your luminaires.
Yes.
And this I don't want, because the luminaires are a highly commoditized product. So I would just want to be able to write a tender. I want to, I've got 10,000 warehouses across of Europe. I want to tender out, those hundreds or thousands of kilometers of light for an effective price. But once I've selected your IT system, I'm now locked into you. I can't tender my lights anymore. I'm not, I've got locked in, and then I'm, that's just way too dangerous for my business. So, and therefore I want those two from a separate entity.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that in talking to some of one of the largest retailers in the world. They suddenly found that their lighting provider had pulled off the cover and said, hey, by the way, we've got this IoT control system, IoT connectivity that can talk to beacons and so forth. And rather than being really pleased, they were really angry that this kind of strategic decision had been made for them, and they basically refused to use it. So, so I think what you're saying rings true with me. I'm assuming that are there standards that doesn't your life become difficult because you have to port your product to all these different luminaires, or is that just the cost of doing business?
No, I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Because a lot of people are asking, right, this radio communication, shouldn't that be an open standard, right? So if you look 10 years ago, everybody was running Zigbee, the Bluetooth mesh, and I mean, we're on the iBeacon show here, so the Bluetooth mesh is also a standard that's being pushed a lot over the last few years. I mean, it's still very early stages. It's just been released. It's now getting first adoption. But what we see in the market is, if you want to do this for significant buildings, you need a wireless mesh standard that can scale to the sort of 10,000 unit scale, right? That's what you need to do a large office tower or similar. Mm-hmm. And what we found, and I mean, you don't even need to take my word of it. If you just look at the Bluetooth mesh standard and their own marketing, they're talking about 700 nodes, 1,000 nodes in a mesh network. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we just see this gap. And the problem that you just see is that the standardization bodies are not able to innovate quick enough. Mm-hmm. So what we've done is we've taken the Bluetooth physical layer. Mm-hmm. So we're using the same chips as Bluetooth, mm-hmm. which gives us all the cost advantages of Bluetooth, but we've built our own mesh on top. And because we're not bound to a standard, we can innovate far, far faster and at far faster scale with our Bluetooth, with our mesh technology. And because we're using the same Bluetooth chips, actually we can reuse a lot of the hardware designs. So any hardware design that is made for Bluetooth, we can put our software on as well.
Fascinating. So so you mentioned kind of the numbers, 1,000 versus 10,000, order of magnitude scaling difference for really big installations. Can you point to any other things that kind of break down? Where are the gaps with Bluetooth mesh that you find you're able to fill with your proprietary solution?
I mean, scale is definitely number one. The second thing, what we see is the data throughput that you require on the network, right? So lighting control itself is really low data rate. If you want to get some occupancy data out, still reasonably low data throughput. So this all goes all right. But what we're seeing is that actually one of the biggest value adders is asset tracking, right? So what if you now, instead of turning every light into a beacon for example, indoor navigation, mm-hmm. very low throughput on your network, if you now want to trace iBeacons integrated into a product, mm-hmm. and you have 10,000 nodes out there and you're going to try to triangulate them, then the amount of data you're going to put over your network is humongous. And we're able to do this with our so we're currently rolling this out in, for example, hospitals. So we're putting Bluetooth battery powered chips on medical equipment, and we can localize them with sort of 5 meter precision within the hospital. And we're able to do this because our network is far more powerful. And I have not seen, I mean, I'm not an expert on Bluetooth mesh, but I haven't seen anyone do anything like this with the Bluetooth mesh. And actually, we're seeing quite a few people now using similar Bluetooth mesh technologies as we're using as the backbone network to get the asset tracking data out.
No, that makes sense. From our own point of view at Williot, just to put my day job hat on, we look at like stores that might have 100,000 products and that could each have a battery-free Bluetooth tag on. So 100,000 items can generate a lot of traffic, and so that's something. I don't think anyone's got a solution for that today, but that's something that I think will really test the mesh networks that are out there, and to be frank, it will test us as well. So to freely pitch some of our capabilities. So one of the sort of proof of concept or testing our own system, what we did is one of the tests we did is we took 1,000 Bluetooth tags, put them in one
cubicle meter.
Ah,
And then we're able to identify all of them.
that is fascinating. Okay, so 1,000 tags in a cubic meter. And, how long did it take to register all of them? Was that was it a few seconds? Was it an hour or?
You're over asking. You have to ask my CPO.
Gotcha. Anyway, the fact that it worked, and I don't, my sense is that most people would be happy for over a period of time to get that. And actually, I think it's we come across this difference quite a lot. Previously, if you wanted to tag things, you'd stick an RFID sticker on it, and that whole system was designed to scan 1,000 tags in a second. But I think with Bluetooth assets, whether they're tagged with battery-powered tags or something else, if you've got a lighting infrastructure, you're not talking about someone pointing a gun at something, pulling the trigger, and then needing to read everything instantly. You can actually have continuous tracking of assets and inventory because the readers they're in the ceiling. They're constantly there.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
And this is what we saw with one of our clients in the hospital, right? So they were looking at real-time asset tracking.
Yes.
But they were not bound to a technology, right? They just said, look, we have so many beds, we just want to know where our beds are.
Yeah.
So whether we put Wi-Fi tags on there, RFID tags on there, Bluetooth tags on there, it doesn't matter as long as we know where our beds are.
Yeah.
And so they did quite practical trials with all these kind of technologies. The beauty of our solution was, well, the infrastructure is free, right? Because luckily for us, they didn't have any LED lighting yet. So they were already looking to upgrade the lighting to put LED lighting in. So the luminaires are already paid for from a different budget, right? This is a different guy with a different budget that just has a budget to put LED lighting in, which pays for itself in 5 years anyway on energy.
Yeah.
That puts the infrastructure in. And then after that, you can just see every wheelchair in real time in your office without, instead of saying, okay, I now want to find a bed, I can run around with a gun. Completely different proposition.
This is so important because if we look at as startups and technology prognosticators, we're always looking at whether this technology is going to be successful or not, and is it achieved escape velocity. And the biggest gravitational pull back to Earth for these things to crash and burn is infrastructure, the cost of the infrastructure. Yes. And I think what you're eloquently pointing out is that IoT can get a real boost when essentially the infrastructure is being paid for with energy saving ROI, and then you suddenly have this ubiquitous connectivity. And so then the question is, what do you do with it? So what are you doing with it? Tell us about some of the projects that you're working on. You talked about this hospital project tracking beds. You don't think about people losing beds, but they do. Wheelchairs and all sorts of other equipment. What else is this idea being used for?
A range of sectors is humongous, right? So hospitals is absolutely a key market just because the ROIs are so fantastic, right? So what we're now seeing with our clients is that they can save about 10 to 15% of the amount of medical equipment they need to buy. So 15% less beds, and a bed in a hospital is about 10,000 euros, right? So that's humongous saving just by putting one tag on, because remember, the infrastructure is already paid for. So you put one tag on, and now you can do by 15% less. And then the nursing, the time the nurses spend. So on average, there's a famous stat from the NHS in the UK that a nurse on average spends 1 hour every shift looking for stuff, wheelchairs, drip feeds. One of the funniest anecdotes I heard in the hospital space was somebody telling me that actually people are hiding medical equipment under the ceiling plates everywhere in the hospital because they just want to make sure that if they need a drip feed, they will have their own private stash, right? So they're all walking around like squirrels, hiding
Amazing.
all medical equipment. I mean, imagine the saving you can achieve. You can actually find all this medical equipment. So hospitals is huge. But we're not just doing asset tracking there, right? We're also doing occupancy analytics, air quality monitoring, indoor navigation, huge value to patients, right? If they can navigate inside the hospital. The logistics market. So we're now working with some of the largest logistics parties in the world.
So tell it, yeah, how does that work? So I'm just sort of thinking through these use cases, and you've got the Luminaire, it's listening for tags on assets, got that. Navigation, you've got the Luminaire broadcasting out this kind of constellation of mini GPS satellites so that your phone can recognize where you are and how to get you to the consultant that you're due to see in 5 minutes. But with the logistics thing, how does that work?
So logistics, I mean, this is a very interesting proposition, right? So if you are a warehouse developer, basically your clients are now asking you for a smart warehouse, right? They want a warehouse full of sensors. And you just see these warehouse developers sitting there because they're box builders. They literally just build square boxes. It's nothing more than that. And now somebody wants a smart warehouse, and you're like, what am I going to do? So what if we're basically going to them and saying, well, do you have got lights in your warehouse? Yes. Well, if you just spend that budget with me, it's not going to increase anything, but then your warehouse is already full with sensors. Fantastic. And they then go to their customers and say, right, this warehouse is now pre-equipped with an asset tracking solution. So this is a far more valuable warehouse.
Yes.
And then they can then ask a subscription to activate that service, so it's an extra revenue stream. And for the end customer, it's brilliant because they can now do asset tracking, so they can track the routes of their forklift trucks and their goods, and they can optimize their routes in the warehouse because they can know exactly which goods are where at any given time. They can do indoor navigation, because if people are looking for certain goods, they can be directed to the right location. So they can do air quality is actually also a concern in those warehouses. Apparently, the volatile organic components are very high with all the stuff going in. And if you take the logistics a little bit wider, not just box shifting, but if anything is happening to the boxes, so light manufacturing or something, you can then follow products as they go through the different processing stations, so you actually know whether a shipment, if you have a picking order, you can now actually give an indication of where that thing is in the picking order process if all the goods have been put on a basket and where the basket is in the process. So that's really interesting. We're now moving into educational. So again, indoor navigation. I mean, we're not talking primary schools here, but also air quality monitoring, super important. Can we monitor the air quality in every room? We can place lots of air quality sensors, and we can basically have an independent view on the building management system, saying, well, the building management system might say it's the right temperature, but is this true? And you now have an independent sensor checking on the system.
Cool.
And then, most recently we moved into chicken farming.
Yes, tell me about these chickens.
Well, it's a really interesting market, and it really tells you something about where we are in the world, because what we're now seeing is people saying, right, I've got these huge chicken farms, and I just want to make sure 100% sure that the quality of those chickens, that their quality of life is optimal, right? Because the better they are, the better they grow, the more production, the more eggs.
Yes.
So actually making life very comfortable for a chicken is very measurable in productivity, right? If you got an office and you make people 10% more productive, Well, can you fire 10% of the people? No. So, to make that business case to your CFO is actually a really hard business case to make.
Yes.
If I make a chicken 10% more productive, I can measure that at the end of the day because I can just I can literally count my eggs.
Yes.
So we're doing both lighting control, so we can optimize the lighting to really make the space more effective for the chickens, and the chickens really respond to this by growing faster, and also producing more. But we can also, very importantly, is what you're seeing in the market now, is that the gas emissions of farming become more and more important. I don't know what the situation is in the US, but currently in the Netherlands, building projects are being stopped because of the gas emissions. So they have to measure the gas emissions, and when again we can help them with it, and we can track the chickens or the cows, so we know how many meters every chicken walked. We know, how much they weigh. We can measure the entire output, and it's really fascinating because I just remember the first time I pulled up at one of these chicken farms, and you pull up in the middle of nowhere, being greeted by a farmer that is standing in his oval, and then he says, "All right, well, I'll go into my office." And you walk into this chicken farm, and you walk it through his house, and then you walk into the office, and you're like, "Is this like a CIA hideout farm?" Because suddenly you've got like a wall full of screens. You're thinking, are you like trading on the stock exchange? It's like, no, this is my data room, right? And it's like, this is a high-tech data center where you can see the growth rates of his chicken, the egg production, the food intake, the temperature, everything.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's
so these are high data, high IoT enabled businesses, and they want the data infrastructure.
I never knew. That's fascinating. Well, I'm comforted to hear that the health and happiness of chickens is important. Boris Johnson gave a recent speech where he painted a picture of a dystopian future with legless chickens, which to me seems like the whole point of eating chickens is that they have legs. But anyway,
just the legs.
But that's very good to hear that there might be some hope of a correlation between good business outcomes and happiness amongst the chickens, and that CIA data room is also fascinating as well. Gosh, I think we have to wrap it up here, but this has been fascinating. Very very interesting journey from smart cities, lampposts looking for empty parking spots, through to smart buildings and hopefully environmentally more friendly, to this very interesting thing that you've identified more clearly than I've heard elsewhere, which is the strategic opportunity, not just for the lighting companies, but for the whole IoT industry, with this infrastructure for free, which is starting to blanket buildings. So Bastian, thanks very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Well, normally we ask what 3 albums you would take to Mars, but maybe I should be asking you, what are the 3 best concerts that you've been to?
Yeah, I think for the recording, I'll just stick to the more corporate question.
Okay.
Which I actually prepared. So the first one that came to mind was "Spring" from R&B, which I thought was a great song because you're going to be on this plane to Mars, or space to Mars. So anything that sort of reminds you of sunshine and spring and the beauty of nature, I thought was a brilliant.
So the song is called "Spring" and the group is
R&B.
R&B. Okay, as opposed to not familiar, but that's a good excuse for me to find that and listen to it. And so that's number 1. What's number 2?
No, then I thought it's going to be a very long journey. So if I can only drink 3 songs, then probably a very long song. it's going to be. So this is one you probably, well, I'm definitely sure you know. So and I'm probably not the first one to come up with this. I think this is box standard Android, but Stairway to Heaven came to mind
It's
as
great.
being very applicable and very long, so that you can use that on a big journey.
Yes, and you could learn to play it on a guitar or something and amuse yourself with that as well. It's kind of the
Yeah. Well,
classic beginner's aspirational thing to play.
exactly. And then number three was, well, as I'm gonna have to miss my sort of business and entrepreneurial work for at least 2 or 3 years. I thought of bringing my favorite business song, if you can call it this, which is "The Gambler" from Kenny Rogers, which I think is a fantastic song to just keep in mind. Whenever you're doing in business and dealing with investment, I think that's that's like the number one song to teach you about business and as this is still an entrepreneurial, but then corporate link, I love to put that one in.
Very thought-provoking. I love that. Very good. Thanks very much.